Welcome back to Grumpy Vent Garage. Today we're working on the 2019 Jeep Renegade with the 1.3 MultiAir turbo. And what we're doing is the 40,000 mile scheduled maintenance for the vehicle. The scheduled maintenance requires changing of spark plugs and also changing the air filter. And it's very convenient because both are actually in the same area. Okay, first step is going to be to remove the engine cover. There's actually two 10mm bolts, and then there's two ball and socket style quick disconnects underneath it that we're going to have to release as well. Now with the engine cover removed, we can see where the air filter is held, and then the air box we also need to remove to get to the spark plugs. But now is a good opportunity to kind of clean up some of the stuff that gets underneath the cover. So I got some dirt and dust. I'm going to vacuum and clean that up, because once you open up the system, you don't want any of that getting into your intake tube to the turbo, because that would be problematic. Again, in a previous video, I showed you how to check your air filter on your Jeep, but this compartment right here is where the air filter is housed, and it's really just closed by 4 8mm screws. You can also take them off with a Phillips or a flathead, so that's kind of convenient if you don't have an 8mm. So with the 4 screws removed, you can then lift up, and there's clips in the back that will slide out, but you have to kind of wrestle this out. A quick tip is when you're actually lifting it up, press down in the back and it'll help release the clips. It's not going to be super easy, but you can do it like that. Now with that disconnected, you can kind of push this back, but also you can pull out your air filter, and as you can see, this one here, pull it out. And as you can see, this one here, not all that clean, but I've seen much worse. So next we need to remove the air box. It's over the top of the engine. It's covering up where the spark plugs are at. It's held in place by 2 10mm bolts, one here and one here. And then we need to disconnect the intake tube going to the box, and that's held in with a 7mm on this hose clamp. With the hose clamp disconnected, it is pretty loose, so you can go ahead and remove it. You don't want it to fall when you lose it in the engine bay. So with the bolts removed and the clamp removed, you kind of need to pull the top part away a little bit so that you can lift up the air box that has to come out. It's got the same ball and socket style quick disconnects that are holding it in place. But if you come here to the side, you'll see a hose for coolant, but also a hose for, or actually a wiring harness that's held in a clip. This just needs to be released right there with a trim tool or a flathead screwdriver. So I'm going to do that now to release that, but then you can pull this whole piece out of the engine bay. So I went ahead and removed the entire intake hose. You don't have to do that, but I wanted to be able to show you how this clip comes apart. So it comes apart at the bottom, and then you can pull the hose and the harness out of the clip and remove the air box. So with the air box removed, you can see there's a little bit of junk in this air box. So go ahead and take this opportunity to go ahead and clean this box so that you don't have this flowing right into your new air filter. Now there is like a insulator on top of the engine. We need to remove that. Now be careful, it tucks underneath this piece here, which is not going to be easily removed. So you just need to lift up. The actual cover, this back piece, these pieces here are kind of thick. You're going to need to reach to the back of the engine and pull these out. If not, you'll tear this. So with that foam piece removed, we can see the coils on top of the engine. So this is your valve cover. And then underneath these coils at the bottom is going to be the spark plugs. You can see a little bit of debris, road debris. You need to go ahead and clean that now before we remove any of these coil packs, because you don't want that debris falling down into the spark plug hole. And then once the spark plug's removed, any debris that's there could go into the engine right on top of the piston. So the coils are held in place with 10mm bolts. So we just need to remove these, and then these coils can lift up out to expose the spark plug. So with all the bolts removed, you can then take the coil and just lift up like so. And it releases from the spark plug. You don't need to disconnect the harness, but I'm only going to pull one at a time, these coils, so that we can do each individual spark plug one at a time. So with the coil removed, you can see that the hole that the spark plug in is very, very small, and it goes down. This is where you're actually going to need a specialty tool. It's going to be a 14mm spark plug socket. This particular one is magnetic. You don't have to use a magnetic one, but you will need a low profile 14mm spark plug socket. Additionally, this is an opportunity for you to check to see if you have any leaks with your valve cover. If you did, you would start seeing oil pooling at the bottom of the spark plug holes. So as you're looking through these individual spark plugs, make sure that there isn't oil building up in any of these holes. That can cause misfires, but also it shows you that you need to change the gasket on your valve cover, and this is the prime opportunity to do that. So here is the first spark plug removed, clearly used, but it's not oily. So we're not running rich or any kind of oil leaks of that kind. So this is a pretty normal looking used spark plug, but it is time to change it. So this is a spark plug we're going to use to replace the factory ones. They're made by NGK. They're iridium plugs. They're iridium right there. I'll go ahead and put the part number for it on the screen in case these are the ones you want to use. Also, I'm going to leave a link in the description for you to go ahead and buy these plugs if you want to use these plugs. Again, here's the plug. Iridium. They come pre-gapped from NGK, so you won't be needing to use a gapping tool, and you really wouldn't want to use a gapping tool on these. I did check the gap, and the gaps are all between 30 and like 32 thousandths, which is within spec for what the gap should be for the plug. Looking at the old plug, in case you're like, oh, I got to have a Mopar specific plug, you can see right there, it's an NGK plug. These plugs are the same, so you can either pay the few dollars that it is per plug for this one, or $1 billion at the dealership to get an actual Mopar stamped NGK plug. Before placing the plug in, I also want to go over NGK has a coating. I'm not exactly sure what coating it is. It's on the threads already. It's part of their manufacturing process. They do not want you to use anti-seize on these spark plugs. I'm used to always putting anti-seize on a spark plug, but they specifically say do not put anti-seize on these threads. They have a coating on them to prevent them seizing in. So again, don't put anti-seize. So now we need to go ahead and install the spark plug. With the spark plug in the actual socket, being careful not to damage the plug as it goes down. Just place it in place. And what you're going to want to do is kind of go counterclockwise just to make sure to kind of get it into the hole without cross-threading it. And then go to an actual clockwise to start threading it in. You're only going to want to thread it in hand tight. You're not going to want to use any tools at this point. You're just trying to get the threads to engage in the head, and then we can come in with actual tools. Okay, now it is finger tight. I can't get it any more with my hands. Now we need to come in with a torque wrench, and we need to torque the spark plug to 13 foot-pounds. 13 foot-pounds is not a whole lot of torque, so it's not going to be very much. So what I have here is a 3/8 drive torque wrench. I'll leave a link for a torque wrench like this in the description below. But when you're using this, it's not going to be very much, especially a torque wrench's size. Even though it says 13 foot-pounds, it's not very much torque. Okay, so the first one's installed. So now it's time to go ahead and put the coil back on top of the spark plug. I'm going to put some silicone paste. This is basically dielectric grease. And the purpose of this is to seal that connection. It prevents water from getting in there and potentially fouling out the connection between the coil and the spark plug. Okay, so that's the first one done. Now I got to do 3 more. Okay, so all spark plugs are installed and I had the coil packs put back in place. Now we need to run down the 10mm bolts that hold in the coil packs. Just run them down finger tight. Then we're going to come back with a torque wrench and we're going to torque it to a very low amount, which is 7 foot-pounds, which comes out to 84 inch-pounds. So inch-pounds, 84 inch-pounds, it's not very much. There's no pressure that these coils are seeing. They just need to be held in place, and that's why it's very low. Remember, these bolts are going into a metal insert that is inside a plastic valve cover, so not a whole lot of torque at all. So I'll leave in the description a link where you can get a 1/4-inch drive torque wrench, one that'll do in inch-pounds. But again, you very well may not need to use a torque wrench on this. It just needs to be snug. It's not holding back any pressure. If you snug it up, you'd be good. But if you choose you want to use a torque wrench, I'll leave a link in the description for you to get a torque wrench. So now that the coil packs are installed, now we need to go ahead and put everything else back. It's going to be the reverse of the removal. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that now. I could not find torque specs to hold down the airbox, but again, it's going to be just tighten it down until it's tight. Just snug it up. You don't need to smoke it down. Okay, now we can go ahead and put the hose back on, the intake hose. And just 7mm holding this on. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and put in the new air filter. Again, link in the description for all the part numbers and then all the tools that are used in this video. They're all in the description. And again, to get this lid back on, you're going to get it in place. And there's tabs in the back that have to be located. So you want to press on the back to get the tabs to engage. And then you can run down the 4 8mm screws across the front, and that holds the airbox on. Okay, so to put down these 8mm, again, you're just snugging them down. It's not a real torque spec on it. Just run them down until they're snug. They're just retaining the filter. Okay, now we can place back on the fancy engine cover. Got the 2 sockets up front, and then we got to run down the 10mm bolts in the back. Again, just snug them up. Well, I hope this was able to help somebody that has a 1.3 MultiAir in a Jeep Renegade to change their spark plugs and also the air filter. If you like this kind of content, do-it-yourself kind of content, also the stuff we're doing in Grumpy Vet Garage, like working on the Supra or my Eclipse or my Silverado, please consider subscribing to Grumpy Vet Garage, liking this video, sharing this video. Additionally, we have a Grumpy Vet Garage merch store. Link to that store is in the description below. By all means, check it out and get something for yourself. It really helps out the channel to grow. But as always, thanks for coming and seeing me in my garage. Until next time, have a good one.